Good. We're live and recording. Welcome to this webinar on the 27 success factors of employee engagement. Let me get some technical issues out of the way first. First of all, the chat, it seems that everyone is hearing me. So you can use the chat to exchange during the call. I will not be monitoring the chat. However, I will be monitoring the Q&A. So there are two channels you can use: questions and answers and the chat. I will be looking mainly at the Q&A. I'm hosting this webinar alone, so I will be focusing mainly on the presentation, but we'll have a look at the Q&A from time to time. Now, I will be sharing the presentation of this webinar. I cannot guarantee for the recording. We've had some issues with recording in the past, so I will try to make the webinar available, but I cannot promise. So if you want to make notes, feel free to do them. I actually encourage that. Also, while you're listening to this, we're going to spend about 45 minutes maximum me presenting the material. So if you can just switch your phone off and be present, that would be super cool. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get going. The objective of this webinar is to give participants a good understanding of the 27 factors which are scientifically validated that have an influence on employee engagement. Now, I put an emphasis on scientifically validated because behind the factors I will be presenting here, there are scientific studies behind it. So behind every single factor, there is at least one or two studies, empiric studies, proving that the factor actually measures something and that the factor has an influence, that it's correlated, strongly correlated with employee engagement. Then at the end, I will present you a diagnostic tool that allows organizations to identify opportunities to increase engagement. But the main part will actually be for you to give you a good understanding of these employment engagement factors. And a few messages which are really key to what I'm going to present here. First of all, that companies cannot afford to have disengaged employees. Now with people working remote, it will be even more important to keep that high level of engagement. There are a number of traditional recipes to increase engagement, but they're like okay, but they're not sufficient. Okay, and some recipes, especially about motivation, are even based on quite outdated beliefs about motivation and engagement. And what sometimes shocks me is to see also young people still having strong beliefs in these recipes or theories which are clearly outdated. Another important thing is that engagement, which is not the same as motivation, is the result of micro assessments we're doing all day. We'll come to that. And then when it comes to engagement, context really matters a lot. Now let's look at what do we mean by engaged, not engaged, or actively disengaged. So this is a categorization which actually comes from Gallup, who regularly does surveys on employee engagement. So we have those who are engaged, and those who are engaged are those who are really highly involved, enthusiastic about their workplace, and they're also bringing in their full self. So what means is they're really in the work, in the workplace with their full personality, with their full self. Then we have the not engaged. The not engaged are those who are there, who put in the time, who put in their work, but there is little energy and passion. So those are the ones who cannot wait until Friday comes. And this is unfortunately the majority of people in an organization. And then we have the group number 3, and these are those who are really actively disengaged. So these are people who are really unhappy at work. We all know them. They are resentful, they are acting out of their happiness, and they can poison the work environment, because what they do is they undermine the potentially good work of the engaged and those who are sort of semi-engaged, not very engaged. Now let's look at some numbers to give you an idea where, according to Gallup, which is always to be taken with a pinch of salt, because we don't know exactly how they do it, because this is proprietary methodology. It's a bit of disadvantage of using numbers like Gallup, but they do global researches, and I think it's a good place to start. So, according to Gallup, 85% of people, of adults worldwide, are not engaged or actively disengaged. Remember those two categories? Not engaged, actively disengaged. So 85% worldwide are in that category. Now, you would say, well, worldwide, how does it look in Western Europe? I see that there are theories about outdated beliefs about motivation and engagement. I will be answering those questions a bit later. And I will also be answering what are the more correct beliefs. So now, does it look better in Western Europe? Actually, not. In Western Europe, it's actually worse than the worldwide average, because there we have 90% of people who are either not engaged at work or are actively disengaged, and only 10%. So how does it look for Switzerland? In Switzerland, the numbers are pretty much on the worldwide average. Interestingly enough, we have highest levels of engagement in worldwide, apparently in the US, but these are numbers from 2017, so I don't know how it is now in the later time. But US has relatively high, 30% engaged. South America, interestingly enough, 30%, and New Zealand have high scores. So those are the places where we have high levels of engagement. Now, if you compare Switzerland, we are in Europe, we're sort of in the middle. Where it really looks bad is in countries like France, Spain, Italy, where you have extremely high levels of actually actively disengaged. I mean, in Italy, you have 30% of actively disengaged people. And in France, you have 25% actively disengaged people. So people who are really unhappy in their work. I mean, can you imagine what that does for a workplace and what that does for an economy to have those levels of disengagement? Good. Now let's look at why employee engagement matters, why it is so important. And here I'm going to, in this section, I'm going to cite from Gallup's global survey and also from books on the topic. So we'll stay, if you want, a bit superficial still, but giving you a bit of context. So why does it matter? Business must recognize that an organization's vitality and capacity for organic growth is linked to the everyday experiences of their employees. Remember what I said, that people do micro assessments all the day. So it's those micro experiences that people are doing every day that have an influence if people engage or don't disengage, or not engaged, or even disengaged. So, and what does it, how do the numbers look like? So if you look at what Gallup found is that when they looked at, and this is a typical consulting type of analysis, where they say, okay, we have organizations that score top, top tier, highest levels of engagement according to their method, and then lowest, and then they see how do the top tier and the low tier compare. So 10% higher on customer metrics, higher productivity, higher sales, and higher profitability. So this shows that engagement has an influence on these very important performance measures. Then it also has an impact on the reduction of certain measures, and these are more internal ones. Lower absenteeism, then we have 2 turnover figures, 24% lower turnover in those organizations who naturally have high turnover. Let's say you have a shared service center or a call center. So those are typical organizations who have high turnover. And in low turnover organizations, so people tend to stay over longer periods of time, the impact on turnover is even higher. And the other interesting thing is when people are more engaged, there are fewer accidents and fewer quality incidents. So engagement really makes a huge difference. Now, the thing is that just hiring smart people and motivated people is clearly not enough. How many of us have, as business leaders, hired people with great CVs, and they come in the organization, and a few months after they've joined, they start to become less motivated, they start to disengage, and they essentially underperform. So just hiring a good person is not enough. And what's also important is that they also must engage, and not only engage in the work itself, so they must also engage in working together. So that makes a huge difference in a team, and that's something that, for example, studies done by Amy Edmonton from Harvard University, who studied high and low performing teams. She showed that engagement and certain factors we will be looking at that influence engagement have a huge impact on how people actually work together. Now, we'll come to these questions. So how can we increase engagement? And one of the most outdated measures to get more engagement is to use fear. Okay, so be engaged or else. That's one of the worst recipes. And interestingly enough, it's one of the recipes. There's a very famous example of really outdated motivation and engagement practices, and this is the case of Volkswagen. Under Winterkorn and his predecessors, the way to engage was to put an enormous pressure on people, to really scare people. And the Dieselgate is a good example of employee engagement using outdated stick and carrot methods, mostly carrot methods, to get more engaged employees. Narun, does that answer your question? I will set that live. I'll consider that done. And now we're coming to the correct belief. So let's look first at the traditional recipes. And these traditional recipes, I say, they are not wrong. They're actually quite okay. Okay? So one of them is transformational leadership or leadership. Transformational leadership is something that became very popular sort of in the late last century. It was also almost a hype around transformational leadership, and it was very much around these charismatic leaderships who bring in a lot, and then through their incredible personality and the way of leading people, people will then follow. So that's one way of explaining engagement. The second, which is also not wrong, is goals and objectives. Clear goals and objectives. A lot of the literature on more engagement, more performance focuses actually on goals and objectives. And then we have financial rewards. Financial rewards, again, they're okay. What we found when we did our research is that financial rewards are more hygiene factors than they are really performance factors. But financial rewards, they do have their place. So I'm not a believer to say, well, financial rewards don't matter. But there is a problem with these recipes. These traditional, I would say, quite okay recipes, is that they ignore highly relevant contextual and psychological factors of employee engagement. And what's a bit of a pity is that there's a lot of knowledge around, and there's a lot of research and really good, very practical, amazingly practical research, which has been published since 1990. So that's when it really started, and we'll see it when we talk about a bit on the research. That research is around, but in business schools, it doesn't really enter. I was looking at my materials from my MBA as I was looking at it over the weekend, and I was looking if I can find some of this, and there was very little about it, even in the HR and people management lectures. Many of the things I've discovered as I'm now studying psychology that we didn't even cover. So the message here is that if businesses that orient their human management systems around the basic human needs, so taking into consideration basic human needs, they will get more engagement, they get more out of their employees, more performance, more of what the employees have to offer. What we always say, getting the full potential of the employee. You know, we know a lot of cases where someone at work is really sort of going through the motion, and then you see what they do in their spare time, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing what these people do. Okay, so they're engaged in they run a club. They're super active with much more energy, which much more than you see at work. So it's really about creating a culture of engagement. And to do that, and this again is from Gallup, is to look at the critical elements of engagement, to understand really what leads to more engagement, and then develop the performance and human capital strategies to align and to get more of it. So we'll be stopping now with Gallup. It's really a great report. It's one that you can download. It's 200 something pages, and it has some really interesting insights about employee engagement. But now we're going to go a bit slightly more academic, and this part, I must warn you, it's going to be a bit technical, but it's really worth hanging in here, because it's the foundation of what is then later going to be the tool I present, okay, or the framework. Now, it all started with this guy, William Kahn from Boston University, who in 1990 published this article, Psychological Conditions of Personal Engagement and Disengagement at Work. And he brought in this notion that people at work, they use varying degrees of themselves, okay? Physically, cognitively, sort of how much of their brain they actually use, and emotionally, so how much heart do they bring in. So are they physically present? Are they with full mind and full heart? And that this depends on some psychological factors. So people are constantly making choices. So that's the article in 1990 which started the whole, and some say that William Kahn is one of the founding fathers of the whole employee engagement movement. And many other articles followed, building on Kahn. And I can tell you, during my studies, I read 70 of them. So I went through 70 articles and really looked at different aspects of this whole engagement thing. And it was an absolutely fascinating journey to go through this. And the last one I'm showing here is the Amy Edmonton one, which is quite famous, and which led to the movement around psychological safety. So Amy Edmonton is very much into psychological safety. We'll be touching on Amy when we look at that. Now, the systematic review of those studies, about 70, led me to distill 27 scientifically validated success factors. So 27 individual factors that have an influence on employee engagement. And these factors can all be measured. That's the beauty about it. So they're questionnaires, they're good, validated measurement tools out there, and they're in the public domain, so they're not proprietary. So you can look at it, you can look if you're a bit into statistics, these, you know, how much Cronbach alpha they have, how they're correlated, etc. So it's really, really cool. There's so much stuff out there. It's amazing. Now, these 27 factors can be grouped into 6 main categories, which are organizational resources, job resources, rewards and recognition, engagement climate, psychological safety, and psychological contract fulfillment. So these are the 6 categories, and in each category you have, we split the 27 factors in there. And then based on all these articles I researched, I came up with something like an integrated model, which now I use with my clients to discuss where we need to put the focus. And the beauty is that when we use the tool or the diagnostic, we know exactly where we need to focus. And sometimes we need to focus on these issues on an organizational level, sometimes on an individual level. But it all starts with a good HR engagement strategy, which starts with recruitment. I need to show you here. So I'm going to change the pointer. So it starts with recruitment and selection. So you need to hire the right people, obviously. Then onboarding and socialization, and that's where many organizations already fail. So you have a decent hiring process, and then people join, they get maybe a bit of onboarding, but the socialization is really that they start performing well in the team, so that they start not only performing, but socializing in the team, that they feel being part of something. So then we need a performance management process. The performance management process is really about goals, objectives, feedback, all these type of things. We have tools for that. We've developed tools which are actually quite good, quite practical. And then this is the sort of the top-down part of it. And then we have the bottom-up part, which is training and development. So you're bringing in people into the workforce. And as you have them in the organization, you need to train and develop them, and then you have rewards and recognition. So this is really a very classic HR portfolio of stuff you need to do, but you can certain elements should be part of your engagement strategy. Then you have here different aspects that combined lead to more or less engagement. And one of the measures of engagement, and here we're moving a bit away from the Gallup type of measurement to the more psychological type of measurement, which is the way most studies, when they look at engagement, measure it. They look at how much vigor, meaning how much energy I'm putting in, how much dedication, meaning how much can I identify with my work, and then how focused am I. And these are three dimensions of engagement that can be measured. And these are influenced by these elements here. So one is the organizational engagement climate. So if I'm in an organization where there's a good sense of engagement, good engagement climate, then I will have a good chance to have a more engaged workforce. Organizational resources. So a lot of the traditional recipes are here: strategic alignment, senior leadership, teamwork, okay? And then we have job demands. To what extent there's a balance between job demands and job resources. So if these are in good balance, then I have more motivation. And then we have certain psychological factors, which are the mindset. What's the mindset of the person? Does the work have meaning? Do I feel psychologically safe? And then there are the notions of psychological fulfillment, contract fulfillment. We'll be touching about that, and self-evaluation. So it has a bit to do with mindset. It's a slightly different concept. The self-evaluations are, do I believe that I'm actually capable? So these are things that need to be looked at. And then, of course, linked to the recruitment process is, do I have the right person-organization fit? So do I have a person that fits the organization? And does the person fit the job? Obviously, if these two are not okay, then the whole rest it gets complicated. Okay. Now let's look at the theories behind engagement. We'll look at the most influential theories. It's William Kahn's method of model theory of engagement, job demand resources model, social exchange theory, organizational support theory, psychological contract breach, and psychological safety. So these are the main models we'll be looking at. So let's start with Kahn. William Kahn, Boston University, the guy who wrote the 2019 article. What he says is that there's three factors that influence engagement. They are meaningfulness, psychological safety, and resource availability. So you see, Amy Edmonton talked about psychological safety in her 1999 article, but already in 1990, Kahn identified psychological safety as really important. Is work meaningful? The question of meaningfulness is even more important now than it was before. And resource availability has two dimensions: is personal resource availability and organizational resource availability. So that's one model, okay? The second model is by these two people, Bakker and Demaruti. So if you hear about the job demands resources model, this is one of the most cited models to explain employee engagement. It's a very powerful model, and it was developed by these two. So what this model says is that there must be a balance between demands and resources. And we're talking job resources, and we're talking personal resources. If there is an imbalance of these, this leads to exhaustion, and exhaustion leads to reduction in engagement. And job crafting is a means of balancing this. So it's really something that managers can do to see that there's a good balance between resources and demands. And it goes both ways. You can have job demands that are too high compared to the resources. That leads to disengagement. But if you have resources, for example, someone has high personal resources, but low demands, then the same happens. Engagement will be low. So it's really about the balance. It's not about just getting the demands down, by no means. As I said, one of the most cited models, it's a balance model. I mentioned that. And what employees try to do is they try to find the balance between something they can control, it's the level of engagement they bring in, and something they cannot control, the resources and demands they get. Okay. There are two processes in play. One is the one that leads to job strain, and the other one is with motivation. So if you go back, so there's one process that leads to this one, to the here, to the engagement, and the other one to the exhaustion. So it's two separate psychological processes taking place here. If you look at the example of Leslie, this is an example where a real life example where this was not met. So Leslie was hired to develop a new team. He was promised certain resources. He was asked to essentially develop a new supply chain practice in a part of Switzerland. And he was promised certain resources, like he could build a team or so. And very quickly he found out that he didn't have the resources. He wouldn't get a team. He was asked to first get chargeable himself. And on the other hand, he was asked to go for really the high ticket, very, very big accounts. So there was a clear mismatch between the expectations to go for accounts like Nestle, Philip Morris, and big accounts, and essentially not giving the budget to build a team. So that's a situation where there was a clear mismatch between demands, job demands, and resources. Now, the diagnostic factors that rely on this method are the ones you see here. I'm not going to go in there, you'll have them in the presentation afterwards. Then there's the second one, and this is also an interesting one, social exchange theory. There are many authors behind it, but the most prominent is Alan Sachs from University of Toronto. So what the social exchange theory says is that humans weigh a certain cost versus benefit of forming a relationship. So the difference between the social exchange theory and the job demands and resources theory is that the social exchange theory has to do with to what extent people engage in a relationship. Okay, job demands resources is how much they engage in a particular job. So the people are social animals, people are social creatures, if you want. So they will level their commitment to the degree that they receive tangible or untangible rewards, social benefits. And the social exchange theory also emphasizes that resources that are received are higher, it's perceived as higher value if they are voluntary. So let's say you give genuine appreciation, then it's perceived as voluntary, and that's valued higher. So spontaneous feedback is valued higher than a feedback that is just given as part of a performance management process. The example here is Susan. Susan is an example from a client. Susan was a really very high performing employee. And, but then at some point she realized that the feedback she was getting for her work was not what she was expecting. And also the financial rewards she got for for the work she had done, because she was engaged in a very complicated IT project, and she really went into it with full effort. But she still had her normal job, and she felt that she was not getting the appreciation from her superiors that she was actually doing two jobs. And at the end of the year, she only got a relatively meager sort of extra bonus for all of her work. And if you look now if you looked at her performance goals she had before this example and afterwards, before she really had examples of ambitions of trying to accomplish something in the organization. And now if you ask her, her engagement or her goals are to have more time with the family, to reduce to 80%, this type of thing. So you see that there's something happened there, that's a very high performing employee started to actually disengage. The diagnostic factors we use are opportunities for career development, feedback, and financial rewards. Now we have organizational support theory. Organizational support theory is one where the support provided by the organization, perceived organizational support, is one that is valued by the employee. And there's good evidence that if an employee perceives that the organization is actually the organization, not the managers, the organization as a whole is values and cares for contributions, that the employee will reciprocate this. So it builds on the idea of reciprocity. And reciprocity is one of the, what for Robert Cialdini, who is an expert on influencing, consider one of the main factors of influence. Looking a bit at time, so we'll move on a bit quicker now. But there's a number of factors that influence engagement, which are based on organizational support theory. And I have some of them who are traditional and some are new. As I said, you will get the slides so you can look at them a bit more in detail. Now we come to the last two, which are, to me, actually quite a discovery how important they are. First of all is psychological contract breach. Psychological contract breach is one of those elements that if we have a situation of psychological contract breach, you can guarantee that you will have disengagement. Okay, that's also what happened to Susan. For Susan, there was a case of psychological contract breach, and she got demotivated and her levels of engagement went down. For a motivated employee, because Susan is still, if you talk to him, a fundamentally motivated employee, a very professional, but she has disengaged. It can be defined, the contract breach can define as an evaluation, cognitive evaluation, that the organization has failed to fulfill its obligations. It's a notion of this situation is unfair. And the moment we have this notion of unfairness in there, you can guarantee that, or I can guarantee that you will have a situation of disengagement. And situational psychological contract breach or unfairness are those situations that actually lead to those actively disengaged employees. So it's very important to identify if we have something like this. Psychological contract breach leads to emotional disengagement and can have really negative work attitudes, behaviors, and organizations should try to do everything they can. What the good news is, it can be identified very quickly. There are 4 or 5 questions in the questionnaire. You identify them, you know that you have them, and then you know that you have to do something, and you can do what is needed to do. Okay, some examples are not providing resources. And you see, if you look at this list, you see that the different models are connected. So not having promised resources is a problem of job demands and resources, but if they were promised, then it's also a psychological contract breach. Job opportunities, you promised that I could. You promised that I could do M&A work, or you promised me that I could be working on certain types of clients. And now I'm working with all these boring clients, and people say, yeah, but you know, now we don't have any choice. Financial rewards below expectations, everything that has to do with inequity, lack of access to managerial support, can't influence decisions, disconnect between responsibility. I'm responsible for that, but I don't get the authority to do something, and anything that is considered unfair. So very powerful, and you will see in the example how powerful an indicator it actually is. Finally, we come to Amy Edmondson, Harvard University, and she came up with this idea of psychological safety. She didn't come up with the idea, but she made it a bit more popular. Psychological safety is about the perception that it is safe to take a personal risk. Okay, it's safe to speak up. It's safe to bring in myself. It's something different than trust. Trust is about interpersonal relationship, something I have with a person. Psychological safety is about the team, okay? It was made very popular when Google did this Project Aristotle, where they looked at the difference in performance between different teams, and they found out that some teams performed really well, while others went not so well. So the main difference, there were many factors. They found about 4 or 5 factors which are important, but the main factor, the number one factor, was psychological safety. And that's what I said here. Psychological safety is not about touchy-feely stuff. Psychological safety is particularly important in really, really high-performing teams. And you have some good examples of, let's say, air squadrons, you know, those who do these amazing things in the air where they really depend. They tend to have exercises at the beginning of their when they start, or they go into a case, or if they go into a flight, or they go fight the fire, they have these exercises where they check in and make sure that they are psychologically safe, that they're able to speak up. And what Amy Edmondson also found, and when she did her studies, is that, for example, in hospitals, teams with higher psychological safety, higher performing teams, they would actually report more errors, although they were committing less errors. And that's an important thing, because in a situation of psychological safety, people will speak up, people will make suggestions, people will say things that may not be working in the organization. And you have several examples of where psychological safety was not in place, people did not speak up, and then bad things happened. The Columbia space shuttle was a good example of lack of psychological safety. Amy Edmondson also mentions Volkswagen as a case of an organization with low psychological safety. People will not be able to speak up with very bad results. So now we're getting into the final part of this webinar, where we will look at the team engagement deep dive diagnostic. I'm still looking for a good name, so TED is sort of the latest version. It's 27 engagement factor diagnostics. This is the model behind it. So these are the dimensions, and these are the 27 factors. Now we'll look at practical examples. These are practical examples from several professional services firms where we worked with the version 1 of the deep dive. So you will see practical examples from different, it's not just one organization, different, but you'll see how it works. So what we do is we do a snapshot. Snapshot is a survey, which is a very short survey, which is based on, it's very similar to the Gallup survey, okay? So it's 12 questions, no, eight questions I use, or something around that. And then we look at what are the top and the lowest scores. I think I used 12 questions. And then we have the deep dive, where that's really my tool. That's the one which we really use. And that's where we go a bit deeper. Version 1, which had a bit fewer factors. Version 2 is the one I did after I did additional research. So I've been using this for a bit more than half a year now. And it encouraged me really to continue doing this stuff. So what the first thing we do is we look at the snapshot, and we look at the top and bottom answers. And here is an organization which is actually quite good. Huh? That it's quite a cool organization. And you see that it's very clear. People know what is expected from them. They have supervisors that care for them. They have opportunities to learn and grow. They have confidence in the company, and they're enthusiastic about the company. So this is really a cool thing. Okay? But then you have low scores here, which is there's someone at work who cared for my development. I mean, we're still at 4, so it's still quite good. But you see here, it's all about the voice. Okay. Then this is a deep dive. So here we go a bit deeper. And these are some of the top, for example, here you have an organization that is clearly the person who I report to tries to have good relations with the staff. So there's a lot of trust in management, clearly a lot of trust in management. Look at these scores here. Look at these 3 scores. So really a lot of trust in management, okay? What's also the person I report is helpful. So helpfulness, good management. And now look at this one. The organization encourages us to be flexible. Okay, organizations want to be agile. But now let's look at this one, the lowest scores. Okay, the lowest scores of all is the organization readily changes the way we do things. So it's ironic, you see, that we have an organization where there's a lot of trust in management, and that on the other hand, they expect people to be flexible. But then when people ask, well, do we actually change things? They say, well, we're actually not good at changing things. So this means that this organization has a lot of goodwill, but is lacking certain change management capabilities. So it's easy to do something. That's not so easy to do something. But here, change management, or for example, here we're implementing an upskilling program to help them become better at managing internal change. And then here we have the question of autonomy, input, voice, deciding how to do things. Now this is another one which is really interesting. And this is an organization where we looked at, these are measures of the snapshot. So you see here different levels. And you see that the trainees, they have exceptionally high scores. And the beauty about that is this is an organization where a year back, they were losing almost every trainee that came. So trainees were coming, and after 6 months, they're left. So they were not staying with them. So they were really handling the whole trainees badly. So we put in place certain measures, better selection, better socialization, better onboarding, and you see the results. It's really amazing. So you see that when you do certain things, you very quickly see results. So they come in as trainees, then as consultants, the level goes down. Okay, I need to go back here. So here are the trainees, very good. Then next level is consultant. Engagement is already a bit lower, okay? Then comes the senior consultant. Whoa, okay, you see engagement levels are lowest of the whole group. So these are people who are like a bit stuck in the middle. You know, this is like a corporal in the army. So they have moved from consultant to senior consultant. They were still quite happy as consultants. Now suddenly they find themselves as senior consultants and the scores are really bad, okay? As they're promoted to assistant managers, goes again up, okay? So these are the ones who are stuck in the middle. And then amazingly, the senior managers, their scores are actually not that good. And particularly teamwork score is pretty bad. So here we need to do something. We need to do something with the managers and senior consultants on teamwork. And we would need to do something here with this group, senior consultants, to get them up again. And that's what we're doing at the moment with them. Okay. Now, this is another case. This is another firm where they had two teams, a high-performing team and a low-performing team. The blue team is a team that I've been working with as part of the organization. The red team, the #1 team, is a team that I had not had the chance to work with. You see that here we have relatively good scores, relatively decent engagement, level 4 out of 5. It's quite good in terms of engagement, organizational resources, engagement climate, everything good. The red team, serious problem here, low levels of engagement, organizational resources considered as not sufficient. Engagement climate is still quite good compared to the rest, and job resources and some issues with contract breach. So Susan is here. So Susan is part of the red team. Okay. Now we look at we go into the organizational resources. So we're looking at this one here, and we're going a bit deeper. And we see that we have an issue with clarity of goals. We have an issue with organizational autonomy, and we have an issue with HR practices. These are the three. Strategic alignment is like, it's not super, but it's like still okay. It's still above 3. And senior leadership. So there's senior leadership is at 4. So this is good news. So this team is fundamentally has trust in leadership, but there's certain organizational matters here that needs to be corrected. So this is a cool organization to work with because there is trust in leadership and there are factors that you can do something about it. Now we look at job. You see that they had an issue with job resources. So we go here. And with job resources, the issue was autonomy, supervisor support, and opportunities for development, and particularly autonomy. So here we're looking at getting them more autonomy. Ironically, very often managers say that they want their people to be more autonomous, and employees say that they're not getting enough autonomy. Now we come to the last example, and this is for me the absolute coolest bit of everything. So when we did this with the client, I was just amazed about what we got. So this is version 1 of the deep dive. So the new version has a bit more factors, particularly engagement climate is split up, and we have a bit more on organizational resources, and we introduced also the psychological safety, which in my research I discovered that is important. So it's a bit an enhanced version. So now you see certain things. So these are 3 teams. Team 1, team leader 1, team 2, a bit a bigger team, and team 3. So 3 teams. So first of all, look at this. We have been doing with this organization work on strategy and goal management. So you see that this is really good. Okay. So on the strategy side, trust in leadership. So a lot of trust in leadership, good strategic alignment above 4, and clarity of organizational goals. No issues here. And also, when you look at job resources, we're doing good on the job. Okay, we're doing good on the job. The job is interesting. There are opportunities for development. Supervisor support 4.4. So supervisors are really trying hard. So there's no issue here. Okay, job autonomy. Issue with job autonomy here. Okay, and the issue of job autonomy is across the board. So it allows you to see what are things that are across the board. So an across the board here issue with job autonomy. So we need to do something about autonomy. We also need to do something about perceived HR practices. And we need to do something around adaptability and change. So these are at the organizational level where we need to do something, okay? HR practices, change management, job autonomy. Now, organizational autonomy, I said, but we're at the level 4, which is like, okay. Now here comes the interesting one. I said that contract breach was a powerful indicator, and that when we had contract breach, everything suffers. So look at this now. Team lead 2, situation of contract breach. What happens if you have contract breach? The whole rest is red. Okay, look at these here. Contract breach here, contract breach here, contract breach here. Look at these. Everything's red, everything's in the red. So here, if you look at this, of course I know who's behind it. Here you can see that here you need to work at the individual level. So the tool really shows you where do we need to work at the organizational level, like here, here, and here. Or where do we need to look at the individual level? We have an issue with team lead 2. We have an issue with the senior 2 here and the consultant. Now there's another thing which is interesting. Okay, here we have a super motivated trainee. It's amazing. Also, what you also see here, for example, team lead 3. If we have scores like this guy is showing off. These are scores that are unreal, and here we have probably an issue that this team leader is trying to present himself better than he actually is, because these type of scores, they're not good. These two team leads are probably more honest, especially this one. And you see, we have low scores here, relatively low engagement scores here, and the problem is that with this low engagement of this team leader, the whole team, we have an issue with the whole team. The whole team has low engagement scores. So this is what we can do with this, and this allows us really to go in and to have what we call a heat map and really look into what needs to be done. Okay, so that's what I had to offer. To conclude, these are the key messages. It's not enough to hire smart and motivated people. Motivation is not the same as engagement. If you have a disengaged leader, you also have disengaged team members. Engagement is the result of micro evaluations. There's no silver bullet. You can use it's always a mix of factors. You can use a diagnostic tool to guide focused action, and you can then repeat the diagnostic to see what things are going on. Okay, so the final message is, if you want to have more engaged employees, it helps to have a coherent engagement strategy. Now, if you would be interested to have such an engagement diagnostic for your organization, this is how it would work. You identify the teams to participate. You ask each team member to fill out 2 surveys, the engagement snapshot, which is a short one, and the team engagement deep dive. deep dive, which is a bit longer. It takes about 20 minutes to fill. Then you process the result, share it with leadership team. Sometimes we have interviews to clarify, then plan with corrective actions, and then follow up. So that's how we work. And we have 3 packages: a basic package, which is free for the first 2 participants, and then 25 for each additional. It's very basic, and you will see in the presentation, this is a bit more. Here you get the heat map. The scores are aggregate at factor level, and then you have sort of a package, but then it gets a bit cheaper. And the premium is really where you get the full, you also get the full database, you get the scores at the question level, so you really get the full detail. Okay, but this is not a sales presentation, but I just wanted to show you a bit how we do this. I know that we run a bit out of, or at the end of our time, but if you have questions you would like to ask, let me put them in the questions. So what more correct beliefs? I think I answered that question. Then there's one question. There is more correlation per column than per line. Depends. No, we always need to be a bit careful. These are small groups, so these are more patterns we see. That's why the interviews are important. But it's in this particular case, yes, you're right. The main issue is we have really an issue with certain employees that we need to work on. And it's particularly in one team where we have the disengaged employees, and there we have the issue with the contract breach. So that's really it. Who did you survey to get the 3rd grid, anonymous employee? Yes, sort of. It was the deep dive. So you do the survey. People fill out the survey, and then you have the result. The smaller the teams, the less anonymous it actually is. And actually, what we found is that some people actually we tend to see if people want to have it anonymous or not. But in many situations, people are actually quite open to have their to be it a bit less anonymous, but you can do it anonymous actually. The bigger the organization, the more anonymous it will actually be. Will the process be repeated on a regular basis? Yes, the idea is that you repeat it at least 6-month interval. And now that we're checking things, the idea was to do it in a 3-month interval. But after that, it's a bit an overkill to do it more than every 6 months. Ideal is to have it not synchronous with the performance evaluation process, so it's not too much. Other questions? Cool. So I wish you all the best. I wish you a good rest of the week. I'll be going on holiday from tomorrow, and then I'll be back in September to get fully engaged in my work again. Thank you very much for participating. Take care.